Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Chicago Junction on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network from the John DeVita Broadcast Center. Okay, Tom.
The opinions expressed on the following program do not necessarily reflect those of the station, its management, or that of the Windy City Hometown Network.
All aboard!
Yes, it's the Chicago Junction, being the radio program that is all about everything that is railroad.
Next stop, Chicago Junction.
And now here's our boss, the head of Windy City Hometown Radio Network, as well as being the chief engineer, Mr. John DeVita.
Well, thank you very much, Tom, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the John DeVita Broadcast Center and our very first broadcast of Chicago Junction. So right now, watch your step and all aboard. And now, here is our announcer, Mr. Tom. Good afternoon, sir.
And now I'm going to turn it over to our host, Jack Red Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Tom. That's Tom McKenna, a longtime friend of mine, and he even admits it sometimes. So here we are. We're trying to launch a new series here. It's a beautiful day, as it always is when we record a show. We're pre-recording this on the 9th day of September, so it's late summer. It's a beautiful day today. It's supposed to get pretty hot too, but it's sunny right now. And wherever you're listening to it, be good afternoon, good morning, or good evening. We hope you've had a good day, and we hope we have a good show to give you. Anyway, the show is kind of the end product of a slow but thorough sort of a idea that came to us about 3 years ago. We had Bill Shapotkin on from the Railroad Club of Chicago as a guest, and we talked railroad. And about 5 or 6 months ago, we had Kevin Berry Jr. on, and he's from the, among others, the Chicagoland Lionel Railroad Club. I know that most people belong to more than one. And all of a sudden it said, this is a great subject. Everybody loves trains. All red-blooded American boys do. All red-blooded males everywhere in the world, be they model or the history of railroads or existing train lines or the different locations you can go, like our Union, Illinois for Railroad Museum, or no matter what it is. We were going to a vacation trip to Disney World, and we saw the sign on the highway that said, Big Shanty Museum, the General this way. And I said, we got to check that on the way back. The actual General is there from the Civil War, the one that Buster Keaton made the movie about, and called The General in 1927, and Disney did the Great Locomotive Chase. I believe that was 56, wasn't it? Yeah. So anyway, that's why we're here today. Everyone loves trains at all levels. Let's introduce our panel. First of all, Brian.
Yes, Brian Valou.
And you represent?
Garden Railways in the Chicago area. I belong to the National Railway Historical Society Chicago chapter.
Mm-hmm.
I actually belong to several clubs, from down to Cincinnati to my hometown of Reading, Pennsylvania, and I like railroad history.
That's Reading?
Reading.
Not reading, like we used to say in Monopoly.
That is correct, not reading. When I moved there, I was corrected.
Okay, and can you give any kind of a website or address if anybody wants to inquire about membership? Or?
Oh, yes. With the Garden Railway, we have two big clubs here in the Chicago area. One is Big Trains of Chicago, and the other is the Chicago Area Garden Railway Society, or KAGRS for short. So it would be www.cagrs.org. grs.com.
Okay. Very good. Doug Kendrick is our next. By the way, these are founding members here, folks. This is like the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. These are the men we're building on here. They've risked their lives to come down here today. Anyway, Doug Kendrick from which
It's
club?
Doug Kenyuk.
Who?
Kenyuk.
Oh, Kenyuk. I'm sorry. Let me correct that.
That's okay.
There's no more beautiful word in the world to anyone with their own name, right? Want to spell that out for me again?
K-A-N-I-U-K.
Okay.
Like Canadian Canucks.
Okay. Okay, Doug, and you're with the what?
I'm with the Railroad and Short Lines Club of Chicago.
Railroad and short line.
Right.
Okay. And what does a short line railroad mean?
Short line means a railroad operates in a limited area.
Kind of what it sounds like, huh?
Yeah. We cover regionals. Prior to 1970, Chicago and Eastern Illinois would have been considered a regional, but it was considered a Class 1. So, but railroads operate in a limited geographical area.
Now, this wouldn't be confused with the what they call the interurban trains, like the South Shore is the last one in America, I guess.
Well, South Shore is two parts. There's the passenger part, which is the old interurban, but there's a freight part, and that we cover the freight part.
You do? Okay. Okay, let's hear a website or something here, a
All right,
phone
the
number or
website's
something.
dhke.com.
dhke.com.
Right.
Okay, that's good. Mr. McKenna, Mr. Tom.
Tom McKenna, I don't have any personal background with the railroad or railroad systems, but my family, my father worked for the CTA for 42 years. I have a son that works presently for the Union Pacific in their maintenance, and I had a brother that designed signal systems. He started with the CTA in Chicago, then he was director of the RTA in Cleveland, and then he worked for a company that built railroad signal systems worldwide. He's lived all over the world, South Korea, Mexico City, London, England. So my knowledge of railroads, other than firsthand railroad travel, is what kind of rubbed off on me from my family.
Okay. I'm kind of in the same boat you are. Okay, sitting in, guest star, Don Figarelli from the Donna Sports Show, which you can also access on this Windy City hometown and probably on this radio station also.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning, Don.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Jack.
And thanks for being here.
It's amazing, fascination with different sports, different things, railroads. To me, the railroads, I don't know anything about it as far as just riding one. The last time I was on one is we took a trip, the Santa Express, which is pretty good. During the winter, the various park districts offer go visit Santa, and so we took the grandkids from I believe it was Wooddale out to Elgin, and Santa was on the train and so on. It just was great. They should maybe do more things like that. But my one question is to the panel, which very, very knowledgeable here, is why did they get rid of the cabooses? Caboose, to me, that was fun to see the old caboose come at the end of the train. What happened to the old caboose?
Do you want to take this?
Well, yes. It's a matter of economics. Remember,
Really?
railroads are still a business. And they looked at it and they said, okay, we got two up front, two in the back, and they just put a little electronic device, because what did the guys in the back actually do after a while? Railroads have unfortunately become part of a conveyor belt for good movements. Just the way it is. So they looked at it and they said, well, we could put an electronic device. What information do they need from the rear? Brake pressure, commands from the locomotive. So that's why the cabooses went away.
Again, a computer eliminating some jobs.
Yes and no. It's automation. It's
Progress.
Progress, you call it.
Well, I saw a piece a number of years ago. It has to be, because Charles Carroll did it on the CBS. He's been gone for how long now? But
Well,
anyway,
that's right. On his On the Road series.
Yeah, remember seeing that? He said about how it was great to have the caboose, or just have someone to wave to, and then they said some railroads were bringing them back or something at the time.
Well, some railroads are, because there's certain jobs where you're going to have to go backwards. So you have to have a crew member on the rear to guide you.
They don't call them cabooses anymore.
What do they call them now?
Shoving platforms.
That's it, right? Oh,
What?
brother. Shoving platform.
Shoving. What do they shove?
Well,
Freight?
because the train's going backwards.
Oh, you mean, okay, I see. It's
So they're-
another, okay.
Well, we would call the cabooses now the shoving platform, and the crewman stands on it. If you look at them, the windows and doors are boarded up. And they stand on the platform and they direct the engineer in the opposite direction.
But it doesn't have any engine or power, does it?
No,
Oh, okay.
no, it's just a caboose that they can't
So,
use as a, they
It's
can't,
kind of like being in the crow's nest or something.
well, FRA rules kick in. If they use it as a caboose, it's gotta have certain glazing, it's gotta have certain
Yeah.
safety features, it's gotta have seat belts all over the place. But if they call it a shoving platform with no windows and doors, they get around the FRA rules.
FRA, what does that stand for?
Federal Railroad Administration.
Oh,
Oh, aha, it's government again, huh?
Yep.
Government, our friend government. What would we do without them? But always, as you said, the caboose has represented something kind of like cozy and friendly all the time, to at least to a casual observer. No?
Oh, yes, it is. I mean, it was fun. When I worked with the rail system, it's just like when from the cab of the engine, you know? Yeah, I remembered my childhood growing up. I used to wave at the engineers in Pensy, and most of them waved back.
Pensy?
In the caboose. Yeah, I grew up in New Jersey and Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
and it was fun.
Neighbor's father was a Pennsylvania engineer right down there, because they had 59th just west of Damon a little bit was the roundhouse, which we're going to talk about later anyway, roundhouses, but the what were you saying? Caboose, yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes, the origin of the word. Did anyone know the origin of that word? It's supposed to be like, I heard, cabin house.
Actually, caboose
Yeah.
was a Spanish word
Yeah.
meaning head.
No.
Yeah, cabaz.
Cabeza.
Cabeza.
Or
Cabeza is not Espanol, see.
yeah, and it,
Really?
it was for the head. That's because that's where the conductor conducted his business.
Oh.
He's actually the head of the train, and because he's the one that gets the orders. He's going, and he tells the engineer where to go. Of course, being a former engineer, he might have told us, "Okay, we can go." I'm in control then,
Yeah.
because he does not run the train.
Yeah. Now, when you say the head, that's not the head in the Navy sense, now. I know
No, that is a different different
You
connotation.
were a naval careerman, I'm right?
Yes, I was. I'm retired chief gunner's mate.
Very good. But so it's from Cabeza then.
Yes,
Okay. Well, see, we learn something every day. That's why we have the show here.
and actually, the caboose actually originated on the Chicago Northwestern
Okay. When was
You know.
that about?
in the 1870s, and they took an old wrecked boxcar. It happened to have a hole in the roof, and they put a little cabin on there. So this way, the brakeman had a way to see the train to make sure there were no problems along the way.
Oh, very good. See, some things sometimes are just kind of accidental in the way they're found, but it is development, right? It's just everything we have around us came one time is a new innovation, or
That is correct.
yeah. So
You know, again, getting back to waving at the people on the trains, the engineers and the caboose, the workers in the caboose, you know, anybody that was born and raised in Chicago or lived here for any period of time, we basically were surrounded by railroads. I mean, no matter where you lived, you were always, there was a railroad crossing nearby, or you traveled underneath the viaduct. There were major rail yards in all parts of the city. You know, you mentioned the year 1870. What would you say probably was the first years that Chicago really became the major railroad hub of the country? Was it around the Civil War, after Civil War, or
What would be before the Civil War?
before?
Yes. Your big hometown road? What, the Chicago Northwestern, 1848, I believe it is.
Correct.
That's when the Pioneer made its first run.
Yeah, you know, those were the days when railroads, I mean, they made cities. I mean, if you got a railroad to come through your...
That is correct.
You know, that's why when people sit and they sit at a railroad crossing and they wonder, you know, hey, how come we have to sit here and wait for the... Because when you got a railroad to come through your town, you were more than happy to sit and watch the railroad go by, because that was progress. And if you got them to stop in your town, I mean, that's what cities built up around railroad stops. And
then the trains inspired dreams. And I mean, when you look at literature, there are two inventions of man that really inspired a lot. The big sailing ships, especially getting up into the brig ships and everything, or the steam trains, the passenger trains. When a lot of stories are written, a train is actually worked in there somehow because it's in the background, But I mean, from writers of great science fiction, one of Chicago's greatest writers, Ray Bradbury, from Waukegan. He wrote several wondering stories, and it was talking about the train because the train inspired wonder and travel, and this is a machine that's going to. It comes from and it'll take you away, but it could bring you.
It is a great way to see the country, and I've taken the city of New Orleans down from Chicago to New Orleans, and I mean that's really a great trip. I mean it's a overnight train, and I mean it really gives you the sense of what this country is all about. I mean, flying over that area doesn't come even close to giving you that sense. I mean, I can really see why so many people fall in love with railroads and railroad travel, because it just has, like you said, it's built on dreams. It's what this country was really built on. Probably almost, well, I would venture to say everything that we have at one time was probably transported somewhere along the line on a railroad.
Oh, yes.
Now, Doug, maybe I'll throw you one to begin with. How do we explain what's the decline in passenger service? What do you attribute that to? Is it
Multiple factors.
okay? We're here. Let's hear them.
Railroads, prior to about World War II, were too busy looking at each other as competition, failing to realize there was other forms. Now, other forms couldn't go everywhere. The railroad did. For example, no competition really from river traffic because they only can go where the river is. Pipelines were small, and that didn't take a big leap in technology until after World War II. So that left highway and air travel. Air travel was looked on as the luxury or the toy of the rich prior to World War II. And trucks, well, there wasn't a highway system, so it was catch as you catch can. But after World War II, railroads were still focused on each other as competition without realizing the other guys were making significant gains. And they were being held back by, unfortunately, by a combination of management, unions, and government that didn't allow them to compete.
Now, last night, Turner Classic Movies had one of my favorite pictures on, probably yours too, North by Northwest, and the railroad figures very prominently in that. Now, that's as recent as 1959, and we still had significant passenger service. And to me, that's yesterday, so not recent yesterday.
Well, yeah, you were looking at the premier passenger train then, the New York Central, the 20th Century Limited. That lasted until 1967. Passenger travel was, but a lot of the smaller runs were being slowly taken away by that time. The one thing that, like you mentioned, okay, you got the air travel. Air travel really came in big, and especially when I guess it was called the Constellation became the big major airliner in the 50s, in the mid-50s. But also at that time, with the Eisenhower administration, they set up the highway system, the building of the highway system. And yes, that played a very big part.
I know the bill called it the National Defense Interstate Highway System, and it was, I guess it was inspired by those Autobahns that they had in Germany in the 30s even.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yeah, Eisenhower's vision of it was, in the event of war, the highways were straight enough that it could be used as emergency runways.
Every 7th mile is perfectly straight, supposedly. So.
Yeah. In fact, I don't know if you know a little bit about Eisenhower. When he was a young lieutenant, he was with the transportation, and he was looking for ways to move, and he actually did a cross-country trip with a bunch of Army trucks and everything to show that you can drive across country. And the trucks were heavy duty enough that they didn't bog down that much and get stuck.
So,
And this was in 1924.
yeah, okay, that was, he was young lieutenant, yeah. Wonder if he was balding then already. Oh, well, we'll have to ask
No,
him.
he wasn't doing that much stress.
After-
He didn't. Patton was still his friend.
Oh,
Okay. Hey,
Well,
Jack, just a moment. Fellas, take me back, not being a railroad guy, take me back before 1620, when the Pilgrims came to this country, right?
Mhm.
Back in Europe, right? Germany, England, France, whatever, in Europe. They had railroads, did they not? Or when was the first, form of a track somewhere in
They had
Roman times or something? Or,
They had
when
tracks
did
that-
it?
pulled
Well,
by the-
actually, the Romans. Actually, we can thank the Romans for the width of our tracks.
I was gonna, yeah, is it standard?
Yeah, actually that made standard, and it didn't in England. Correct?
You're giving them the myth one.
Well, it's the
the
story
other one?
that they follow. But it's true. But they were following the trenches when they laid track in England, and it ended up becoming 56.5 inches.
Okay.
Is that?
Actually, it was varying sizes, but they finally standardized on that.
You don't agree, Doug, or?
No.
Well, that's,
it.
No, God,
well, you can
it
keep
was
going
the
with
chariot
it.
was about that wide, but the first rails was all different sizes. Somebody said, "Oh, let's go with 5 feet." It's where the flange was is what counts. They had the flanges on the outside, found out that didn't work, put them on the inside. That difference is about 4 inches, or goes from 5 feet to 4 feet 8.5 inches.
Flange is what now?
That's the thing that guides their wheels on the rail.
Oh, okay, okay.
So they moved it from the outside to the inside. The width of each wheel is about 3 inches. So you subtract off about 5 inches. So you go from 5 feet to 4 feet 8.5 inches.
Now, prior to any
Now,
local,
5 foot gauge, we can argue about how that came about.
Well, we can have fun. I mean, they had 6 foot and 7 foot gauge.
This was back in the Roman times now you're talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
right?
Those are the rail. Actually, the first. I was reading an article in one of the English rail magazines, and they came up with there was actually a painting of a mine where somebody laid wood, made a wooden track with coal mine carts, so this way they can keep going, give it
No.
a steady path. And this was in like 1680.
I read something about
1670.
1500 even, they had pulled by little donkeys or by...
Well, you had
horses
carts
or-
pulled by horses and such, yes.
On track.
On a tramway, yes.
Yeah, so-
And the oldest known one found so far is like 1710.
So that's the beginning of rail, the idea to guide and to
Mhm.
keep it on.
It's
Okay,
been
so-
around longer than that. They found evidence in Greece. They were transporting ships between 2 bodies of water using a grooved set of rocks.
Okay.
When did
what were they pulled? Was that
Horses.
Horses,
yes.
yeah.
When did the first, not an animal pulling, when did that come about? Where at, the first,
First locomotive.
propelled.
yeah,
1802.
is
Where is
that right?
In Los Estados Unidos?
In England,
England, okay.
Is that
there
right?
was an engineer, well, in the 1700s, late 1700s, they developed a steam engine. Thomas Newcomb. And they were using the steam engine in the mines to pump out water. James Watts, he did a great improvement when they put pressure on both sides of the cylinder. Newcomen's just put steam on one side, so it would put up, and then the steam released into the atmosphere, went down, and it went that way. With James Watts, they got it where steam got pushed it back and forth. The first mining engineer, gentleman's name was Richard Trevithick, and he developed an engine, his second one. The first one didn't quite work, and they put it, and actually it was too heavy for the wrought iron rails that they had, and broke it, but it actually moved down the track at like 2.5 miles an hour, and actually pulled like 25 cars or something, which were a lot smaller than what you'd see today.
Wow.
but filled with people and stuff, and actually pulled it for like 4 miles.
That was 1820,
1802.
Brian?
1802.
I mean 1802.
That would maybe compared to a tram we'd have at the zoo or something right now, or
Yeah.
Wow.
size-wise. I mean.
Yeah, but yeah, the tracks were wide. They had a single piston, and it was actually geared. They had a flywheel, turn a big gear, and it was geared to both wheel sets on one side, and that's what took it down the tracks.
So this was in what part of England, or
Outside London.
was this be experimental at the time, or
No, this was actually working in a mine.
in the mine? Okay,
Yes.
mine. Okay, I heard that mines were the first place to use rail.
Well, no, that's what actually started it
Mm-hmm.
and got it going.
So, and then from there, it spread out to, transportation for.
Well, yeah, but it stayed in England for a while. It was slow getting started, like with any new thing, and finally, it was 1827, I believe. They ended up with what they call the Rainhill Trials, and they had several people building locomotives, and they were going to pick one for the first official railway to open, and they wanted steam. The Stockton and Darlington Railway. And a gentleman by the name of George Stephenson, who is a famous locomotive of the Stephenson family, made several great locomotives, and they won the trial with a locomotive they called the Rocket, which actually set the basic design of a steam locomotive that we know today.
And what year was that?
1827.
So it was like wasn't really improved on as such.
Well, yes, it has been improved upon.
But I mean, the design, basic.
Yeah, the basic design, where the boiler, instead of being vertical, was horizontal. And it was a fire tube boiler. You had fire at one end and actually went through tubes that heated water, which produced the steam to go into the cylinders. And then you had a stack up, which drew the draft through the firebox and fire to bring the smoke going up. And then you had a set of pistons. They were vertical. I mean, they were, they were vertical, but they were at an angle, basically. But they went to one set of wheels, and then the wheels were connected by a drive line.
So actually, though, in the U.S., then rails after 1827, right? I mean, we started building them in the state.
Well, we had rails. I mean, one of the first steam locomotives to run in the United States was 1825.
Yeah, okay.
In what is now known as Hoboken, New Jersey, by the name of George Stephenson. In fact, a replica of his locomotive is at the Museum of Science and Industry.
Yes.
And it was a geared locomotive. It ran on flanged rails in a big circle on his property. And he was the first one. And actually, he applied for making a railroad in New Jersey at that time. And, but the first one, so he rode. But the first one that really gets acclaim is on the B&O Railroad, which they started building in 1827. On July 4th, they laid their building stone. The last signer of the Declaration of Independence, Carroll, he said next to signing the Declaration of Independence, this was a great thing, laying this cornerstone, which became the great Baltimore and Ohio rail system. Wow. And they built a small line out, and the first steam locomotive really used for something was built by Peter Cooper. They call it the Tom Thumb. And they did the famous race with a horse to show that...
Really?
Yes, they did. They ran because they had coaches pulled by horses. Basically, they were stagecoach with flanged wheels. And the Tom Thumb, actually, he was winning the race, but the way the piston system worked, they worked with a belt system on the axle, and it slipped off. So he lost the race. But that set steam going in the United States.
Okay, that was we've heard about that, haven't we, in history books or something?
Yeah, they always refer to the best friend of Charleston, which was the second one.
And where was that held? This race?
Well, the race was held From Baltimore to Elcott Mills in Maryland.
Maryland, okay, which is how far?
It was, 14 miles, I believe.
And then you say, what was the next one you referred to?
Best Friend of Charleston. That
Which
was
one?
in South Carolina, I believe.
Which was it?
Best Friend of Charleston on the South Carolina Railroad.
Best Friend?
Yeah, that's what it was called, the train.
Oh, okay,
The engine
Best
and
Friend.
the cars were called the Best Friend of Charleston. And I think that one went for a while, and I think the engine had a explosion.
Oh,
Yeah, it started 1830. It was started being built, and it's opened up the railway. Like you said, in South Carolina in 1831.
by the time of the Civil War, there were all
Yeah.
kinds of railroads around the
They
country.
did it
Oh,
fast then, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
They
Yeah, there were a lot of manufacturers. The West Point was the first real big locomotive manufacturer. West Point Foundry.
Which is in West Point, New York.
Yes,
How about that? I guess that.
that's where it came. Another one was called DeWitt Clinton. That was the Mohawk and Hudson Railroad.
DeWitt Clinton?
Yeah, DeWitt Clinton. It ran on the Mohawk and Hudson Railroad, which was actually became the start of the Great New York Central system.
That sounds like one of our streets in Chicago, doesn't it? Oh, DeWitt Clinton, no. There's DeWitt and Clinton intersection.
And in 1830 also there was another locomotive which is on display in the Smithsonian Institute. Was built by the John Stevenson, and sent to the Camden and Amboy Railroad in New Jersey. And they got this mechanic who put it together and figured it out, put it together, and he added a few things on his own. After they ran down the track, they had problems running down the tracks. It was kind of derailing a lot. So he developed a little pilot wheel on the front and cow catcher. And the John Bull became the first locomotive with a cow catcher in the United States. And it's down in the Smithsonian Institute, and it is the oldest operating steam locomotive in the world.
Now,
They operated it for its 150th birthday.
now, John Bull, as in England,
Yes.
for the benefit of those, and it seems to be a vanishing fact out there. I mean, some of my own family who were, I'm not going to mention their names now, I don't think it's embarrassing, but they were political science majors, and they had never heard of John Bull, as in Uncle Sam for the United States, John Bull, England, which goes back much further than that, right? Much further. So anyone out there, this is another fact we bring to you first. We never heard it before. That and a baker's dozen, which is 13. That seems to be a vanishing. So anyway, were there big railroads, or were they all beginning like what you call the short line, or were they?
Every railroad started as a short line.
They did.
And what would happen is one short line would be a little bit more prosperous or had better backing than another one, and they started taking over each other.
Buying out?
Buying out or getting them through bankruptcy court or whatever. So for instance, if you look like at the New York Central, that's somewhere in the area of about 500 to 600 short lines all strung together across the country.
No, is that Vanderbilt's?
Yeah.
It's Vanderbilt. It always took some mogul or whatever to get to whip things into shape. And
Right. There's a series on Men That Made America run on the History Channel. It actually shows you the backroom dealings these guys did to build America. I think it's a series called either Men Who Made America or The Men Who Built America. I
Yeah.
can't remember the exact name. And they show that these guys, guy goes, I need to expand my business. Well, you need a railroad. Okay. He goes and sees one guy. Well, you built your railroad to here, and I'll build my factory here. And then they go to a bank and say, we need money to do all this. And then the banker, being a good friend, said, okay, here's the money.
there's not really anything wrong
Yeah.
with that myself. But,
But they show, like, there's a railroad, there was supposed to be a railroad called the South Penn. It was supposed to go through southern Pennsylvania. Today, the Pennsylvania Turnpike actually runs on its own right-of-way. New York Central was in competition with the Pennsylvania. This was going to be a New York Central Railroad. Then all of a sudden, the two of them sat down and said this would be a waste of money. So the South Penn Railroad never got built. Instead, New York Central got track rights instead.
and eventually the two merged.
Yeah.
So, anyway. But
Yeah, we know how that came out.
they rank like steel, oil, railroads, and what are the other biggest industries in the U.S.? There were automobiles, and I think Hollywood even got be the number 5 at one time, believe it or not, from a little little sort of a mom and pop operation. But by the time World War II came around, there was this tremendous industrial complex that basically won the war for the U.S. and the Allies that we had here. And these are the men who laid the foundation. It didn't happen overnight. But is there any? I know I didn't do my introduction before my relationship to any railroad. I know, yes, folks, there was a Chicago Junction Railroad. It was also the Stockyard Railroad or something known at one time. And my grandfather, my namesake, John T. Ryan, my dad's father, was a switchman for the Chicago Junction. My uncle John, my dad's older brother, was a switchman. My cousin Jack, John's son, also worked for the Chicago Junction before he went to pilot school and became a commercial pilot. So, and one of the fondest memories I have was the CJ picnic every summer. They would charter a train. Often than not, it would be steam. And we over at 63rd and LaSalle, we'd get on the train there and go down to Michigan City for the day, which was quite a day, quite a trip down there. Do you ever remember Washington Park and down there ahead?
Right, yeah.
You had the beautiful beach, as beautiful as anywhere it was, the picnic area. You had the amusement park, the zoo, and a tower way, way up you could walk up to, and the woods were there. And that was the, we didn't go any Disney World or anything like that. That was the big thing. As a matter of fact, one of the neighbors, one of my dad's old neighbors, I guess he worked for the CJ, said, just quoted as saying, because all the cousins went, he said, "This isn't the CJ picnic, it's the Ryan picnic." So anyway, that was our big thing for the summer in those days, folks. But and later on, I was on the police department, as was Tom, for a number of years, and over around 47th and Kesey's, that industrial area there, and I saw on one of the side of the buildings that said, a placard said Chicago Junction Railroad. I was tempted to steal it, but it wasn't worth losing the job over. Came back, it was gone. So. Anyway, that's my connection to the Chicago. That's where we get the name Chicago Junction here, which sounds like a good name anyway. Okay, now what about today? We had some of these luxury type. They had Chicago. What they called the one Chicago Orient Express or something like that. They were selling people on comfort and luxury. And are any of those still around? Or
well, yeah, you have a few. There's a company that started called Iowa Pacific, and they're now they have an enterprise. What they want to do is rebuild passenger cars and put them on passenger trains, and they started out doing it with the city of New Orleans. They've got like 3 cars that they'll put on the back of an Amtrak train. City of New Orleans going down to New Orleans, and that way they get extra luxury. They're pampered.
Oh.
Yes, not only do you get your room, you get your meals and such, and you could just stay on the train, not even worry about it.
Well, that to me, that should be the selling point. I mean, it sure beats driving yourself. I mean, as far as fatigue goes.
Another thing is, one of the advantages of rail travel is, I spoke about traveling the city of New Orleans several times, and most people travel by air, and with the expansions of the airlines and the airline industry, most airports are 30, 40, some 50 miles outside the center of the city. But the city of New Orleans, I mean, you leave from downtown Chicago and you arrive in downtown New Orleans.
That's the one thing. Amtrak has great improved service between Washington, D.C. and New York. And several people, put it to the test. One guy flies the commuter flight to New York, and the other takes the train. See who takes them the longest. Especially when the Excella came on. The Excella is the new high-speed train in the East for us. But you go from downtown to downtown in less than 3 hours.
Right, in Washington D.C., if you land in Dulles, it's about a $50 cab ride from the airport to downtown.
Yeah.
And even if you land at Reagan, it's much closer, but it's still. But they do have public transportation, or a rail, the metro system in D.C. that operates out of Reagan, but not out of not out of Dulles.
My daughter and son-in-law, up until past May, lived in Alexandria, Virginia, which is suburban Washington, D.C., still within the Beltway over there, and they were very close to Reagan. So when we got there, was lucky to come in and feel like us going to Midway Town, something like that, almost as close.
Well, I know one time that I took the city of New Orleans, I took the CTA rail system downtown, walked over. So I said I made the trip from Chicago to New Orleans all on the rail system, public transportation.
Now, speaking of, you want to say something, Don?
No. Well, the only thing is, as far as the time element, I mean, Tom, from Chicago to New Orleans on a train, right? It's going to take you a little
Overnight.
while.
Yeah.
But I mean, a plane, you're there in what, 3 hours, 4 hours? I
Not
mean,
even.
Not even. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
you got that to think about. You know, if you got the time, yeah, great. The rail would be perfect. But I mean, if you're kind of limited, right? You got to fly. It's gonna.
Well, it's just it. People have forgotten. Now people are starting to rediscover. But yeah, take 2.5 days journey to go from here to Seattle.
Mhm.
You know, yes, you're going to hit some plains, but the minute you start hitting the foothills of the Cascades and the Rockies, on the western side of Montana, you're going to see some spectacular sights all the way
Oh,
into
yeah.
Seattle.
Yeah.
Or you do the split in Spokane and go down to Portland.
Mhm.
I mean, you're going to see some.
We did our first real vacation with a car at 82 like that. We took 2 weeks. And my wife, myself, the two kids were young. Jennifer was almost 7. Michelle was almost 5. Almost 4. 5 or 5. She's 3 years younger, so do the math. And my wife, myself, and my mother-in-law went with in a Chevette. The only reason my mother-in-law went with was she hadn't seen a great-grandchild. They lived near Denver. So that was our first stop, Golden, Colorado, right outside of Denver. And there we spent a few days. Then we went to a couple of days down at the Grand Canyon, which is, you know, if anyone hasn't seen that, breathtaking is the absolute, that's Grand Canyon. And then from there, we went across the southern route through Arizona, New Mexico, California. My sister lived in L.A., my sister Joanne, and my wife Deanna, her brother lived in near there. I can't think of the name of the town offhand now. It's Orlando? No. Anyway, so and then we came on the way back. On the way back, I meet on the Oklahoma Turnpike. I run into a lieutenant I'd worked for, Paul Calamita, was retired now. We're getting ready to leave. Look, here he is sitting in the next car. They lived in Arizona by now. They were coming back to visit. Hey, Paul, you know. So he asked me if I missed Ronnie Nash and all that downtown, and I said, "Don't you?" You know. So, anyway, it's strange the way it was something that happened that way. But that can be the same. What you just said. The reason I really, what beautiful scenery you see, right? We came into the foothills of. I've never seen anything like that. The Rockies there, you know. All of a sudden, you're in a dark shadow because of these are just the foothills. It seemed like my wife was always driving when we went into something like that. When we went into in Nebraska, she's driving when it looked like a tornado that hadn't touched down in the sky. What's this? We'll keep driving. Don't worry about it. And same thing with the driving into Denver. We even took us different routes. Like it cut through a corner of Wyoming, so we said we were there too. So took it a couple 3 hours more.
Again, it's, you know, it really gets back to, you know, your basic philosophy about life and what you want to do and how you want to do it. And to get back to what we were originally talking about, plane travel versus train travel. Planes got it over in time. I mean, but is that what we really want? I mean, do we want to really get someplace? I mean, naturally for business purposes, you know, it's, you know, you have to do it.
Do you remember?
But as far as pleasure travel, you know, you fly out to Los Angeles, you know, and so I made it here faster. But what did I miss along the way? I mean, it's the whole it's the whole culture of this country. Fast food, fast travel, fast television shows,
Fast women.
Yeah, right. I mean, and when you look at it, when you really look at it, you're in a hurry to do what?
Yeah, right.
Well, that's even more so now with the computer age, because if your computer doesn't come on right now, you feel like you're back in the Stone Age. But that's what makes me think of a film. You're a film buff, right? Brian? How about you, Doug? You're a film buff? Okay, the old movie, I think it was Orson Welles' second one, The Magnificent Ambersons. There's a quote in the beginning that says, "The faster we go, the less time we have," or something like that. And that's just what you were saying now. You just, what are you doing? You know, as you said, so what? You know, you're saving time. You should be savoring something else. And
Right, and again, I mean, it's just, like I say, again, I keep getting back to what I'm familiar with, and that train, the city of New Orleans. I mean, traveling, from north to south across the United States and all the things you think about. I mean, I just saw that great documentary, Burns documentary about the Civil War. And again, railroads really play a prominent role in that. But, you think of yourself, you're rolling along the railroad tracks. I mean, all of the Civil War, how important it was to control the railroads. Actually, it was tantamount to victory. Railroad.
Were there different gauges in the north and south? Or?
Yes.
Yes.
Like what?
Basically, most of the South was built around 5 foot.
With what?
5 foot gauge, or
Oh,
5 foot 6 inch.
It means 5 foot what?
Yes. And ours up in the north were 4 feet 8.5 inches. We had the Erie Railroad was 6 foot at the time. For some reason, that's when you see those pictures of great big locomotives. And there was a few narrow gauge floating around.
So what happened?
Well, the northern railroads, the bulk of them were built around 4 feet 8.5 inches. Erie Railroad had to convert, narrow down. And as the southern railroads were destroyed, the government come in under the U.S. military railroad. That's what it was called.
Reconstruction
USRR,
and all that?
and they were reconstructed as 4 foot 8 because they were supplying the equipment.
So they made it standard.
Yes.
Okay, that makes good sense. What about in Europe and places? Are they different sizes too, or?
Most of Europe ended up being 4 foot 8.5. They still got narrow gauge out there in a lot of places. Russia and that area went 5 foot. No particular reason other than the Tsar said 5 foot, and that was it. When they started building.
You're making me think of a series I saw a number of years on PBS. I don't know if it's going to repeat it, with Michael Palin called Great Railway Journeys. Has anyone ever seen much of that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's a great series.
Great series.
Every now and then a couple of new programs will pop up.
Now, when you mentioned before, Doug, is it A Story of America or someone?
Yeah, it was the Men Who Built America.
Now, is that the one that had the early one about the Revolution too? And
No, this was the one that actually talked about how, after the Civil War, the big captains of industry, how they did it.
Yeah.
How Standard Oil became big, how did the banks become big, and so on.
Yeah.
Monopoly? Can you say trust? Monopoly? Or what? But
Oh yeah, I mean you mentioned Vanderbilt. Okay, you had the Vanderbilts. You had J.P. Morgan, Gould, Carnegie. You're talking the steel industry, Firestone, Ford. You get all them people. They all between after the Civil War to the 1920s. I mean, look at all the people. Westinghouse, Edison, and little-known Tesla.
yeah, the guy that had it right?
Well, he did have it right. He almost, yeah. He and Edison, the only reason why he had it right is because Edison pissed him off.
I guess Edison was kind of a stubborn guy, wasn't he?
At times, yeah.
I understand. I was watching. There was something about him recently, and they was trying to prove how dangerous alternating current was. They had a was it an elephant electrocuted?
Yeah.
Talk about barbaric, huh?
Yeah, they were saying, what's AC power good for? He was going to say, yeah, use AC power for what they were doing is for the electric chair.
Yeah. Oh yeah, didn't he build old Sparky, a model of it or something? Yeah.
Well, we talked about the beginning of railroads and the history. What about the future? What do you think? I know there's so much talk about high-speed rail. I mean, I know the freight industry is,
Well, do you want logic or you want politics?
Yeah, no, give it. Yeah, right. No,
They can't coexist.
No, seriously.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
All right, look, California. California is doing what it can, and they have more people trying to stop them from building a line from L.A. to San Francisco. Now, yes, a lot of it's going to be. Japan did it right. France did it right, and a lot of it with U.S. backing, U.S. money. Built a lot of the, everybody talks about, well, look at the rail system in Japan. Japan's how big? California?
Yeah.
Florida?
Oh, yeah.
And yet they got a magnificent network that they're serving the people, and they're saying it won't happen in California. But California has done more initiatives for rail since 1990 They want it.
Well,
But
they-
you
they-
have
they
all,
they
you have
gone.
every minority group trying to throw an injunction in there and stopping it. I'm just going, yes, you can build it. Yes, you can use the existing rail system to get in and out of the city. That's what they do in Japan. And or not Japan, but in France, Spain, Germany. But they have dedicated railways for the real high-speed stuff.
That's the key, dedicated. What we're doing in Illinois is not dedicated.
Right. What we're doing in Illinois, what we're doing right now in Illinois, they're talking about the 110, 110. Yes. Well, it's a little. We're just bringing back the speed limit that was.
That's right.
Right.
We are talking with jointed rail at 100 pounds, maybe 110 pounds. They were doing speeds of 90 miles an hour average, right up into the 60s.
And then what happened?
Deferred maintenance.
Deferred maintenance. With all the mergers that have happened in the 80s and 90s, unfortunately, yes, they do cost cutting and such like that. A lot of the cost cutting is people. A lot of the ones that do get cut are the ones who did the track maintenance. They do not have the workforce like Japan uses to keep the maintain running. You need people to keep it running, to maintain it. Welded rail is fine, yes. But we're talking, they were running 100 miles an hour with just jointed rail.
That's right.
What it is, we're bringing back the speed of the trains that used to be.
So it's really not really a big deal. As such.
Well, actually, it is a big deal. At least we're finally getting the roadbed that used to be there.
I mean, it's not a just new discovery, is what I mean.
No. Everything new is, everything old is new again.
Yeah. The more things change, the more things stay the same, isn't it?
Right.
Well, that's another great rail line I've taken many times from Chicago to St. Louis. It's just about as fast as driving.
Now,
And now with the price of gas, it's probably about the same price. And once again, you leave downtown Chicago, you arrive in downtown St. Louis.
Yeah. Think of that whole line rebuilt for that. That will be the way to get to St. Louis. Definitely is the way to get to St. Louis. And yes, you'd be able to put more. You'd be affording more trains because the trains will be sold out.
Are these what you call light rail? These passenger ones, or is that light rail?
No, they're heavy rail.
What's light rail? Is that like
Streetcars.
okay, streetcars? The
Streetcar. Yeah, the streetcars.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the L is a heavy rail system.
Is it?
Yeah, a light rail would be the trolley and the new streetcar systems that you see in San Diego. The old ones
Toronto.
in Philadelphia,
Salt Lake City. We're
Toronto,
in Toronto.
Salt Lake City, Dallas.
How did we ever get it out of here in Chicago? I mean, I thought it was a very dependable way to go. Wentworth was the last line to go off, I think, in '62. Then you had the trolley buses for a while. We had those too.
Yeah, and then Mayor Daley got rid of them. Yeah, it was funny. I remember reading an article in Trains Magazine in '73 when they were phasing it out, and they said they want to phase it out because of all the exhaust fumes.
Oh. But the buses?
Yeah,
Buses are better.
the electric buses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the buses are better, right?
Right.
No? Burning whatever it is. I don't care what they're burning, fumes.
Yeah, that's what was the reason.
But it seems so reliable what as it was. We had crisscrossing our neighborhood. We had the old Red Rockets on Ashland Avenue, and I think 63rd may have still had the Green Hornets at the time, didn't they, Tim?
Yeah, I think they did.
Yeah.
I think the last was it. Well, now that I think about it, I really don't know. But streetcars. That was all. You can age yourself by saying, do you have car fare?
Yeah. Or some people still say streetcar when they mean bus.
Car
but-
fare, yeah.
Yeah.
you're
Yeah,
right.
well, yeah, you got the streetcars. Cincinnati had a great system. That's what, thank God for the Illinois Railway Museum.
I
So
heard-
you can
yeah.
see
We're
your
going to get
history
somebody
out
from
there.
there, by the way, on here. I want to get somebody out next time out, maybe. But there's something like 26 big cities in North America still have streetcar systems.
Streetcar systems now.
Yeah.
A good example of how to do one was San Diego.
Yeah.
They started small and they built themselves out, and they've got a fantastic streetcar system. They didn't have any cars made specifically for them. They went and took off-the-shelf streetcars that were actually used in Europe, the ones that were from Siemens Company, and they were being used in the new system they were building in Vancouver, and in Edmonton, and in Toronto.
Salt Lake City has one too.
Yes, now they have.
System. I rode
they
that
have
when I
an-
was out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Now, would they, would it be practical to bring them back here, or would you think? Or? I think it seems like
Yes and no.
It seems like the rails are all underneath the pavement anyway. We're left there.
Couldn't use those. No,
Yeah.
the answer, he's right. It's a yes/no situation, because yes, we could bring them back, but where would we put it? Because those lines that you mentioned, all those cities, those are actually dedicated. They're down the middle of the street. No cars on the tracks.
Yeah.
And they also stop at stations. They actually have stations in the middle of the street
Right. I
for
know
them to
that.
stop at, okay? Where do we have room to put those? Maybe Western Avenue, maybe Ashland?
Yeah, Western.
Can't put one down Milwaukee Avenue, that's for sure.
Cicero, Pulaski, or was it Crawford?
Yeah, that's the point he's saying is the room.
Yeah, you
know,
wouldn't put them on David
may-
Avenue.
You know, could you put them on State Street again?
Yeah.
Could you put them on Michigan Avenue again?
There's room.
See? Yeah, but what about the traffic that you have?
Yeah.
What about the NIMBYs?
Ah, that's
Was
the
it?
key. The NIMBYs, like when I was talking about the problems cropping up in California.
What do you tell them? NIMBY stands for Not in My Backyard. Oh, that's the acronym for it. That's the people who gripe about everything. It's the person who buys a property underneath O'Hare Airport,
And he complains about the
and
plane.
the first time the plane comes
Right.
over, what the heck is this doing here?
Right.
Or they,
Like it was something new, huh?
when they built the Elgin O'Hare
The NIMBYs.
Expressway, remember that?
Yeah.
Now, originally, a lot of people were told that wasn't an expressway, that was going to be a ditch for water retention. And then one day they woke up and there was an expressway there.
Well, you know, there was a proposal to build a light rail system in Chicago years ago. The reason I know that is my brother was involved in it. They spent a lot of money doing research. It was going to go from McCormick Place
Right, the lakefront line.
right down through to Navy Pier, and then eventually out to the United Center, the west side.
Would that be CTA also, or what?
No, it was
Private?
I don't know exactly what.
No, it was
but
going to be CTA operated, but it was going
Yeah,
to
but it
be
was a
built
different-
as
it
for
was-
the tourists more than
Yeah,
for the
yeah,
locals.
right. It was
Oh.
a different style
It's an important industry.
car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
And
we can do.
I don't
Well,
know
they got
whatever
part of
happened
it.
to
They
it.
got that bus now that runs from Michigan Avenue to McCormick Place,
Right,
along the old Illinois Central.
right.
Where did the idea of model railroading start? Is that an American? Is it an American phenomena, or?
Well, it's European. Well, it was like with any new inventions and all. It inspired, and you see a lot of kids. Like, remember at the beginning, you started off talking about how you stood trackside to wave. Kids did that back in the old days then
Sure.
too. And started out with your push toys. They made wooden push toys. They ended up being cast iron. And U.S. basically followed the role of Europe, where it was developed. So a lot of your fancy toys came from there. Some of the greatest floor toys were actually steam powered.
Is that right?
You're talking, yes, with the Victorian homes and stuff. The wheels weren't flanged, but they had they were ridged so they could get traction. But yeah, you'd light up a boiler and you'd run your steam train right on the living room rug. Denatured alcohol.
And it become like the toy train is like synonymous with Christmas and around the Christmas tree so much too.
Oh, it became, I think it really became synonymous with Christmas thanks to a gentleman by the name of Joshua Lionel Cowan. Him and like Mr. Gilbert, they believed in toys for the kids. And when Cowan started Lionel in 1900, he
It was by accident.
well, it was by accident. There's so many legends surrounding the start of Lionel trains.
Let's hear a couple.
Well, when he started his company, it was said, "Why did you call it Lionel?" And he said, "Well, I had to call it something." And Lionel was his middle name.
I was going to say the name.
Yeah. He got his start when he got a government contract for one of his patents. He developed a fuse for flash photography to ignite the powder.
Powder?
Well, Apparently, the War Department saw it and thought it'd be great for setting off the mines, the sea mines.
Yeah.
And when the Spanish War was going on at that time. So, that's it.
Remember the Maine?
That's right, and that's why that's how he started. Actually, the building he started in still exists in New York.
Oh, wait. New York City?
In New York City, in Manhattan.
Got another story, Doug?
Yeah, the way I heard it was, he was trying to sell electric fans. He went into the store. The store says, "Look, I'm building a window display. I want something that moves around." So he built a small flat car that ran on a section of track. Came back the next day, and the guy goes, "Can you build me more of those flat cars? I sold more of those than your fans."
Yeah. So that's why it's the coolest place, right? It's the coolest place to ballpark downtown.
Legitimate.
I'm not going to acknowledge that, John.
Well, believe it or not, we've gotten through our first show, and I think we've enjoyed ourselves, and we're going to do it again, aren't we?
Oh, yes.
Yes,
about a month?
definitely.
We'll talk about that later. And anyway, if any of you who hear this, we're glad you listen. Believe me, we're glad you listen. Tell your friends about it, and tell your friends about WindyCityHometown.com, where you can pick up all these shows. So now, until next time, I'll throw this back to our announcer, Tom McKenna.
The Chicago Junction is a production of the Windy City Hometown Radio Network and can be heard over this station as well as at WindyCityHometown.com, where recordings of all of our shows may be heard. Join us again next time when we take our railroad of imagination on our continuing journey through the wonderful world of the train. All aboard! Thank you for listening.
You have been listening to Chicago Junction on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network from the John Nevada Broadcast Center. Chicago Junction was produced and directed by John Nevada, edited by Stephen Lehman, and our audio engineer is James Rohde. This broadcast was pre-recorded on Monday, September the 9th, the year 2013. Thanks for listening.